Watercolor pencils are a great way to combine two things, painting with watercolors and drawing. It gives you more control because you can have a sharpened point, but it also gives you the looseness and the flow of watercolors. It's summertime and I'm on vacation, so I'm borrowing my dad's Faber-Castell watercolor pencils. My subject today will be a series of ice cream cones because I'm obsessed with food, it's summertime, and I have one mean sweet tooth. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button and support my channel. I'm a public school art teacher and I upload every single week. My materials today are my Faber-Castell colored pencils, they're actually my dad's, and I'm using Fabriano paper. Check out my description box and I'll put a link to all of my materials below. I like to think of watercolor pencils as the best of both worlds because you have that really great control of drawing and you can still layer and blend color, but the water does a lot of the heavy work for you. So with my ice cream cone, I am drawing the lines first, and I'm going to try and keep it pretty simple. I'm doing a waffle cone because those are the most delicious, and I'm focusing mostly on shape and line. I will go back in and I'm going to add a little bit of this yellow, although I've learned from practice that this yellow is very dominant, so I don't want to put too much. With my brush, I'm going to start from the edges and blend in, and you can see the color is mixing and blending, but the lines you drew are still there. Any watercolor technique relies on the white of your paper, so think about where you want your highlight to be and make sure you leave it so it looks three-dimensional. I really enjoy going back with my pencil to darken or enhance my lines, and you can see how rich the color is when you already have water on your paper. So you can do it either way. You can start with water or start with color, but you definitely have more control doing your pencil first. I'll try to add a few more lines in there, but I am going to keep this pretty loose and simple today, and I'm not going to labor over the ice cream because I want this just to be a fun work of art. Time for the ice cream, and for this one I'm going chocolate. I'm using this walnut brown, and I'm putting a round shape on top with a little bit of shading, and then that satisfying kind of curvy line where the scoop kind of spills over into the cone. You can see how satisfying it is when the brown touches the water. You don't need to do too much shading, but you do want to pay attention to where the areas would be darker and where you want your lines to kind of be more dominant. You can tell where the water's already in the cone that the brown is just coming alive. I'm mixing a little bit of that tan that I put in my cone for unity, and I have found that this dark purple makes a really nice shadow when it comes to chocolate. If you use too much, it will look kind of like a cherry flavor, which is okay too, but if you blend it with your brown, watch how it makes just a really vibrant and dynamic shadow. As you know, if you've seen my videos before, I always mix and blend colors. There's rarely anything in this world that's just one color. Leaving your white highlights in your ice cream is going to make your ice cream look more 3D, more delicious, and shinier. Now I go back with my brown because I find the line between the cone and the ice cream a little bit awkward, and I also want to enhance some of my shading and my darkness. So I'm just going to use that brown again to enhance and then soften it again with my brush so that the ice cream cone is simple, but it doesn't have awkward transitions. I also plan to revisit some of the lines in my cone for the same reasons, to make sure that my lines are crisp, my transitions are smooth, and it's just the nice chocolate ice cream cone I had in my head. I'm reasonably satisfied with this cone. I could certainly go back and labor over every single detail, but I'm going to move on, and this time I'm going to try to do vanilla soft serve. And I love this as a challenge because the cone has a little bit more detail, and with watercolor it's fun to paint something that's white. My cone shape is something that you would see maybe at McDonald's or an old-fashioned Dairy Queen, so you can see the shape of it is different, but the concept's the same. I'm shading on my right side to create darkness. I'm going to draw in with that light tan color the lines of my cone, and I'll flash in a little bit of that yellow so it has that nice realistic cone coloring. You can see that I am drawing, like you can see I'm applying shading and I am paying attention to detail. This time I'm adding some blue in my shadow, although I'm nervous that it's going to be too green with that yellow. So we'll see how it looks when I add water. So far so good, and if it's too green, I'll just go back and tone it down with a little bit of brown. Remember to leave your highlights white, and I always like to start by adding water to the darkest part of the object that I'm painting. That gives it that dark area, and then I can rinse my brush and make it more of a medium or light value and not kind of mix all the darkness in the whole thing. I'm much more happy with this cone, but I will go back and kind of amp up that shadow. I feel like I really kind of got the swing of things. My first one's a little bit too simplified, and I think this one has really nice shape and it has just a little bit more detail. And I'm always a person who loves contrast and more variety of value, which my first cone is a little bit simple. Nothing is sadder than an empty ice cream cone. So let's put some ice cream in here. Again, my inspiration is vanilla soft serve, and I'm using this light blue to put the darkest areas of my soft serve. This is the ice cream that has that really satisfying kind of like swoop on top. And because I'm doing vanilla, what's there, like the blue, is just as important as what's not there, which is the white. So I am an artist who is heavy-handed. I usually go a little too dark or add a little too much. So I'm trying to keep it very simple and just adding the slightest little highlight with my blue. Now, you could use any color for your shadow. It doesn't have to be blue, but I think the cool color just gives it this like old-fashioned vanilla vibe. When it comes to vanilla, less is more, and my plan is to leave as much white as possible, but still giving it a nice dynamic shadow. It's time to level up. This time, I will draw a waffle cone that you might get at Marble Slab, like one of those giant ones that folds over in the front. And at this point, with those lines and the way it like V's at the front, it makes me think of a mermaid tail. And I want to add a little bit more shading and detail on this one, since I do kind of feel weird about the first one that I drew. So I want to add a little bit more detail, just shading in some of these diamonds so it has a little more detail and contrast. And if this wasn't something I was doing kind of quickly in my sketchbook, maybe I would even spend a ton of time with every single shadow and detail. But it's summer vacation. This is more of a study of colored or watercolor pencils, something I haven't done in a while. And so I'm just trying to loosely have fun with this. And you can see that I did add a little bit of that yellow, and using my brush, I'm doing the same technique as before, going from outside in, and I'm not covering up the lines that I drew, but I'm just softly blending them. I do want to keep some more of that brown so that it looks kind of like a shadow, so you can tell that that right hand V on the top is behind the curve of the first ice cream cone, if that makes sense. And for this ice cream, for my first scoop, I'm going to do mint chocolate chip. I think green will be a really fun color to work with, and I also want to add some more detail with chocolate chips in this. So I drew the shape, and now I'm using my water to blend the color. And for my shadow, I'm going to use the same blue that I did for my vanilla. Right now it looks kind of sloppy, so using my brush, I soften the lines, but I don't make them disappear completely. Using the same brown I did for the chocolate, I'm going to map in some organic shapes to represent my chocolate chips. Using a variety of shapes and sizes will make your ice cream look more three-dimensional. There is a black colored pencil in here, and I want to limit the use, but I do want to give the chocolate chip just a little bit of a shadow and a darkness. So for the top, I'm going to do a cherry swirl, and this color comes alive when you add water to it. So I'm blending this like reddish orange. Oh my gosh, look at that. You can just taste the cherry when you see that come to life. It could be strawberry, but I think it's a little vibrant. And I want to kind of give it an organic flow to it, like the cherry is mixed in with vanilla. That purple color I use in the chocolate is also a great way to add a little bit more detail, chunks of cherry, and also some shadows. Now, I could go crazy blending color, but I want to keep things simple. So I'm just kind of using a couple colors in here. And I do feel like my cone lost a little bit of its like straight line. So I want to go back and just make sure that my edges are crisp and it looks like a cone. You can do this with watercolor pencils because you can go back over it when it's wet or when it's dry, and then use your water to activate your color. It seems like a shame to waste this big piece of space on my Fabriano paper, so I'm going to do another soft serve. This time I'm doing a chocolate vanilla swirl. I'm repeating a similar shape to the cone I did up top, which is still my favorite, probably because I added a little bit of blue. And I think that with this cone, I'm going to make it more of square shapes instead of diamond, just to change and mix things up a little bit. But my color scheme and my techniques haven't changed at all. I really, really love this material, and I want to give a shout out to one of my subscribers, Ed, who sent me a message asking if I had any tutorials with watercolor pencils. And I hadn't even thought about watercolor pencils for I don't even know how long. I have a set of Prismacolors at home, but I'm on vacation, I'm visiting my parents, and so I thought, well, let me whip out my dad's art supplies, because he always had art supplies for us when we were kids, and I can always count on him to have any art supply or musical instrument lying around. So shout out to my dad and shout out to Ed for this tutorial idea. If I were using regular colored pencils, I'd have a whole lot of work ahead of me, but look at how this brush blends all that subtle shading that I did to make it come to life. This is a material I definitely plan on working with a little bit more, and I would love the opportunity to buy some of these for my students. This would be a really great thing to practice in the classroom because you get to draw and paint at the same time. Doing a swirl flavor is a little bit more of a challenge because they're not on separate little shapes like the double scoop is. So I'm going to do the left side first, and that will be my chocolate. And I know that's going to be a little bit easier for me because most of it will be brown, whereas the difficulty of the vanilla on the other side is not overworking it and leaving a lot of it white. So I'm going to go ahead and use my blue, and I'm going to do less is more. I like the vanilla I did before, but it is pretty blue, so I'm putting just a few lines. The chocolate for me is easy because heavy-handed, that is my middle name. So using a lot of color and making it dark is not a problem for me. Rinsing my brush because I don't want it to be a chocolate on the other side, and you can see it mixed a little bit, which is okay. I'm going to blend that blue line so that you can tell there's, shapes and swirls, but it still looks vanilla. Using the same blue in the shadows of the chocolate will make the color scheme more vibrant and will enhance my shadows. The brush will smooth it out and blend it so you can barely tell it's there. My final steps will be to touch up the edges of my cone because even though I do want it to be loose and fun, I want it to have the crisp edge that a cone would have, and I don't want to lose the detail in the shadows because that's going to make it just look more lifelike and more interesting. All done. That was so much fun. I could do that all day. Thank you so much for sticking around. And if you're interested in more painting tutorials, check these out.